Hey guys, this is Jamie. So today we're gonna talk about fucked up things, and coincidentally, I'm wearing a Neon Genesis Evangelion hoodie. So let's proceed. So I don't want to spoil obviously which series I was watching. If you know, you know. But it had a very interesting cliffhanger at the end, and it got me thinking about eugenics and in general sort of the whole idea of who should progress forward when it comes to the future. um, I guess I am a bit of a pessimist in a way when it comes to the future, because I do feel like specifically with like tech companies and lack of empathy, humanity is pretty much doomed. And when I said tech companies, because we have like heads like Elon Musk and other people who pretty much exploit other classes, working class, uh, and people who cannot afford different things for different reasons, ethnicities, gender, minorities. There's a lot of things basically. I think it's kind of obvious that I have a very sort of communist way of thinking. So yeah. So I kind of don't enjoy this sort of capitalistic hell we're in, and I feel like a lot of my generation feels the same way. But the ending of the show sort of shows that a certain group of people decided to survive, and that got me thinking, like, let's say we were put in their shoes, or like in general, like obviously there's a lot of discussion of like free speech, who should be allowed to speak on certain issues, who shouldn't. Anything varying from Elon Musk saying that this is a slur to people saying that all Russian people should be exterminated and accused of war crimes just for being Russians. So we have a lot of sort of extreme talk going on. And then I was like, okay, I'll try to think of a more black and white, sort of realistic, straightforward example for myself. Because it is a topic, in general, eugenics is a very difficult topic, even for me to think about and comprehend. And I have talked about this to my partner, and we pretty much just agree on the basis that this is a very, very nuanced topic, which neither of us are equipped to properly discuss, because we're not biologists, and we're not exactly the people who would be making even these decisions in the first place. But even to think about it, I just kind of, I mean, at the end of the day, even if we might not have a big say on it, or maybe there will be a revolution done by the people, who knows. But in general, the consensus is that either the people speak out and cause something, or the ruling class does something, or the people change the government and change the ruling class, and the cycle repeats pretty much if you look at it factually. So I was thinking, okay, let's say we do a very obvious sort of way of eugenics, or way of determination on who's good, who's bad. And I thought, okay, let's say trans issues, right? And I'm saying that specifically because, well, obviously being a trans person, I'm up to here with transphobia. I don't personally face it a lot, being in a very accepting country, gay for lesbian being the number one LGBT place. I'm not a lesbian though. But anyway, it was something like, obviously there's a lot of people found from my family, etc., who do not accept me being trans, who I've had issues with, who I have issues with. And it's a rather difficult situation. Like, let's say we would ask everyone who says being trans is bad. Then that goes into certain things like, what about cultural? And this is where it gets more tricky. Like, for instance, we also have, like, for instance, the media's portrayal of Israel and Palestine. I'm not one to talk about this conflict a lot because I feel like I can only contribute to this by saying that I have Jewish ancestors, and but I'm not of Jewish faith, and I feel like it's not my place to talk about it. So if I do end up talking about it, I usually try to obviously make sure that people pay attention to people who know what they're talking about. Because I do think that the thing that is happening, there is a genocide happening. It's terrible in Palestine, but at the same time, I do not like the way that people try to put LGBT as a factor in this genocide. So you have, for instance, people saying, oh, Palestinians are pro-LGBT and Israel's just doing it for clickbait or whatever. And this isn't even a factor. We're discussing about people. And then you go back, for instance, let's say we go back into why I'm saying it's eugenics is because trans people are trans because of biology. If you don't think so, you have issues. So, so then that goes into there is cultural, obviously, significance in that there are religions, there are countries which do not accept trans people. So there are people who may say that they don't accept trans people simply because it is not commonplace for them to see a trans person. And there are obviously people who know trans people in the same country, but others who don't think of it, others who are influenced by the media. So there is no proper way in certain cultures factually, hypothetically, to understand if a person is transphobic or not deep down. And then that limits to even such a simple question, are you transphobic? Yes, no. And then we go into very specifics, like what if this person was transphobic in the past, or what if this person can change? And then when it comes to changing, there's also very different nuances. Like, for instance, I don't speak out a lot on this because I understand that my opinion is very controversial, but for instance, I believe in the death penalty, go sue me. And I believe that it should be done in extreme cases. Like, I mean, Nazis were hung or shot in the Nuremberg trials. What's stopping us from doing that to similar fascists and Nazis these days? Like, for instance, I do not understand in Norway why they keep Breivik in prison playing on a PlayStation, and then he goes into court and spews his Nazi bullshit, or people just do their sentences, move on quietly, remain Nazis, and they don't change. Like, obviously there are people who change, but to state that everyone can change and bend under certain measures is impossible. It doesn't happen. Not everyone can change. And obviously there are a lot of cases which raise eyebrows, and again, like Breivik is an example of an extreme one. Or for instance, like if we look at cases where people were less harsh on prisoners. So we have like Mary Bell's case, who was a child murderer, and because she was a girl, and the first instance of a girl child murdering another boy, which was like 2, 3, she wasn't put to jail because they thought it's a girl, it couldn't happen, and she ended up killing more people. And then eventually she even got money from her memoir. So there's a lot of sort of instances, because, and it's a very disturbing story. And then obviously a lot of people go into saying things like, why should we pay tax money for people to sort of think that they will improve when they won't. And I understand that this is not a very humanistic approach, that I'm very pro death sentence. And obviously then you can manipulate, and if you want a person dead, the person will be dead factually. So it's also a very difficult thing. And in general, our world is really, really tightly knit around connections, around who you're friends with, who you know, who you are. So at the end of the day, people can end up rotting in jail for the rest of their lives, and others will thrive. So fuck, I don't know. Or some can get death sentence and for no reason. So it's a very difficult situation, factually. And we also have extreme cases in history, like Cambodia with Pol Pot, who ended up taking that approach, shall we say, and killing between 1 million and 2 million, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah. But the problem is that we are going into this rhetoric, and I'm not saying that all of us are innocent. We all believe like that this is the limit and everyone else like cannot change. Like, for instance, I don't believe that everyone can change if they're put to jail. And under the right circumstances. And like, for instance, I'm a massive fan of Zimbardo's prison experiments, and I do think that if people are put under certain conditions with the right characteristics, they will end up going bonkers. But obviously, if they live without getting bothered by certain things, they might never end up doing those things. But at the same time, you need to have a specific characteristics to do that. But at the same time, you have like Marina Abramovich's performance piece. I think it was performance piece 0, where she stood in the museum and she let people touch her in anything possible. She had a knife and different objects like a rose, and they all, and in the end, and people ended up like ripping all her clothes apart, stabbing her and stuff like that. And when they were confronted with it, they just ran away when the performance ended. So I am sort of the school of thought that people are inherently evil. And then you can also say that I have a pessimistic view of people because I went through psychological child abuse and I have horrendous PTSD and I have a horrendous time sort of like believing people even. And it takes a while for me to warm up to people and etc. So then there comes the personal bias, and all of that, there's all these factors which we're just talking about the surface of, and that just goes into this one simple definition of if it's a person transphobic or not. And or like, what if there's an LGBT person? Like, people will say, oh, like all LGBT people are not transphobic, so we don't have to take care of them. But there are like there's TERFs, which are lesbians, and there's TERFs, there's transphobic gay men, for all I know. There's everyone out there. Anyone can be transphobic these days. And in the end, it's sort of, I just have my notes here because it's something that I've been cooking for quite a while. And you don't even have like a golden standard of like what is the definition of certain things, and that's why it's very difficult to find international law very often. Like, obviously, we have certain things like you can't, I don't know. UN looks the other way many times, so I'm just not gonna pretend here to say we do have some international laws that absolutely protect everyone. But in the end, we don't have certain laws that are abided by everyone. Like, sure, hypothetically. But for instance, when it comes to online, like you have different crimes as well. And I was talking about this with a friend, and in general, he's been sort of feeding me all these interesting things that I never thought about, and it's also been sort of in my brain, yay for me being social. And there is no certain like rule for internet stuff. Like, for instance, age of consent can be 12, 18, 21, depends on the place. And then it's like, which rule do you apply to a specific case, to a specific culture, to a specific country? And then another thing is like, by me pushing this video, by saying like even the rhetorical question of trans being accepting of trans people can be taken maliciously. Like, for instance, there was that Pride parade where LGBT people marched and said, actually, we're here to groom your kids. And the conservatives said, see, they're here saying that they're grooming my kids. And everything can be taken out of context on top of that. So that can also be a factor. And then if I'm here sitting saying that why don't we wipe out all the transphobes, someone else can sit, I don't know, let's say from a very religious background in the US, and say that everyone who does not believe in our faith or is not in our church should be erased or shouldn't exist. And you have that in very strict religious circles. So you have that as well. And then you go into, what about like children? And then I think that no child is innocent. Factually, like in the Mario Bell case, we need to evaluate the child as a person. And then so you have all these nuances, and these are just the ones I sort of nitpicked from my head in the past, like, for this video. So we run into all of that with the mere question if people can tolerate trans people. And it can be used against trans people, it can be used against me, for fuck's sake. But in general, like this whole idea that we are going into this hateful world where everyone tries to do it's us against them in every circle, it can lead up into this nightmare scenario, even hypothetically. And that fucks me up, because there is no golden standard. There shouldn't be a golden standard, and neither there should be. I feel like we live in this age of very strict sort of like, for instance, there is death sentence, there is no death sentence. So extremes, like there is and there isn't, without analyzing cases. So I do feel like that is something, if you were to ask me, that needs to be changed. And obviously then there will be people who suffer from anything. So with every decision, you have a consequence. And then that ends up with what can we do, because the world is in a terrible place. I have no idea what to do about it. And yeah. So today was a very interesting video. I had a lot of fun, I guess, thinking about this topic, because it's been in my head for a while. I've been quite stressed. Yeah, I guess shout out to the people who have been talking to me and my partner. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to share. That's the way to sort of spread the message. Have some fun with your friends. Have an interesting discussion. You might agree, you might not. You might find out something, you might not. You might really find out something that you don't want to know. And yeah, give it a like if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate if you could subscribe. I'd appreciate if someone could fucking give me a coffee. Oh, fuck. Okay. Anyway. Yeah. Thank you.